So, are viruses alive? It seems like a simple question, right? But for more than a century, it's been one of the most intense debates in all of biology. I mean, they cause devastation, they evolve, they are literally everywhere. But are they actually living? To figure that out, we've got to understand how science even defines life to begin with.
And to do that, we have to start with the official rulebook that scientists have been using for almost 200 years. It's called cell theory, and it's pretty much the foundation for how we look at all life.
So let's dive into this rulebook for life. This is the standard that pretty much every living thing, or potentially living thing, is measured against.
Okay, so here are the core ideas. First, if something's alive, it has to be made of one or more cells. Second, the cell itself is the most basic, fundamental unit of life. And third, all cells have to come from other cells that already exist. It's simple, it's elegant, and for a really long time, nobody argued with it. You know, this idea didn't just pop up overnight. It really started way back in 1665 when a guy named Robert Hooke was peeking at cork through a microscope and saw these tiny room-like structures he decided to call cells. But it took almost 200 more years for Schleiden and Schwann to formally say, hey, all plants and animals are made of these things. And then Rudolf Virchow came along and delivered the final crucial piece of the puzzle. All cells have to come from pre-existing cells. And just like that, those ideas became the bedrock of modern biology.
And then we discovered something. Something that seemed to just shatter those rules. An entity so simple, yet so incredibly powerful, that it throws this whole definition into question. Let's talk about the virus. I just love this description from microbiologist Nigel Brown. He calls a virus gift-wrapped nucleic acid. And honestly, that's all it is. A little piece of genetic material, DNA or RNA, that's tucked inside a protein shell. That's it. There's no nucleus, no mitochondria, no ribosomes, none of the machinery we normally associate with a living cell. So, this is the most important point, right? If the number one rule of life is you must be made of cells, and viruses aren't, well, where does that leave them? Let's take a look at the case against them.
So what happens if we put viruses up against the standard biological checklist for what it means to be alive? How do they really stack up?
Okay, let's break it down. To be considered alive, you generally have to be able to make your own energy. We call that metabolism. You need to be able to reproduce by yourself. And you need all that complex cellular machinery. A virus, all by itself, does none of these things. It's totally inert. Now, you might be thinking, but wait, other parasites, like some bacteria, also need a host to survive. And that's totally true, but here's the critical difference. Those bacteria, they bring their own tools to the job, their own machinery for making copies of themselves. They just use the host for raw materials. A virus brings nothing. It's a biological carjacker. It throws the owner out of the driver's seat and hijacks the entire vehicle.
So, if you go by the traditional rules, the case seems pretty open and shut. No metabolism, no independent replication, no cells. They're just biological puppets, completely lifeless until they can pull the strings of a host cell.
And this quote just brilliantly gets to the heart of the no argument. If you're going to call a virus alive, then where do you draw the line? Is just a piece of DNA that can get itself copied inside a cell also alive? What about prions? It really forces you to see how slippery this definition can get.
But what if the checklist is wrong? What if our nearly 200-year-old rulebook is, due for an update? This is where the whole debate gets really fascinating.
So the core of the counter-argument is this. The whole idea of a completely independent organism, it's kind of a myth. I mean, think about it. Every single living thing depends on its environment and on other organisms. We humans need plants for the oxygen we breathe. We need bacteria in our gut to digest our food. So is a virus's total dependency really a disqualifier? Or is it just an extreme version of a universal truth? Virologist David Balella has this really powerful analogy. He says a virus particle, a virion, isn't dead any more than a seed is dead. A seed is just a dormant little package until it finds soil and water. A virus is a dormant little package until it finds a host cell. In the right environment, both of them spring to life. So from this perspective, a virus isn't dead. It's just waiting.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. On the left, you've got a virus that infects humans. On the right, one that infects ancient microbes living in volcanic hot springs. These things are separated by billions of years of evolution, yet they build their protective shells using the exact same basic blueprint. This is huge. It suggests viruses aren't just random bits of rogue genes. They actually share a common ancient ancestor, which would put them on the tree of life right from the very beginning.
So this is leading some scientists to propose a whole new definition of life. Maybe the key isn't metabolism or cells. Maybe the most critical property of life is evolution. Is it a collection of genes that's able to replicate and evolve? Well, by that measure, viruses don't just pass the test, they pass with flying colors. They mutate and adapt at an incredible speed.
Get ready for a number that's just going to blow your mind. 10 to the power of 31. That's a 1 with 31 zeros after it. That's the estimated number of virus particles just in the oceans. It's more than all the stars in the known universe. I mean, come on. If you measure success by sheer numbers, viruses aren't just playing the game of life, they are winning it.
Now, this whole debate over whether viruses are alive is tangled up in an even deeper mystery, which is, where did they come from in the first place?
Well, there are three main theories. The escape hypothesis says they're basically bits of cellular genes that learned how to break out and go rogue. The regressive hypothesis suggests they were once complex cells that just shed everything they didn't need for their parasitic lifestyle. And then there's the most radical one, the virus-first hypothesis. This suggests that viruses, as these simple, self-replicating things, actually came before cells, meaning they could be the very origin of all life on Earth.
So after all of that, where do we land? Are they alive or not? You know, the truth is, maybe we're asking the wrong question.
Maybe the best answer is that viruses don't fit into a neat little yes or no box. They live in this gray area, this really fascinating borderland between complex chemistry and what we've traditionally called biology. They challenge our categories, and they force us to think much more deeply about what life really is.
And that really brings us to our final thought. When you consider their incredible numbers, their evolutionary power, and their profound impact on every single living thing on this planet, does it really matter if we call them alive, or are they something else entirely, a fundamental force of nature that's been shaping the story of life from the very, very beginning?